You wake up and feel it pressing down on you. Something vague, something coming, a meeting you haven't had yet, a diagnosis you haven't received, a conversation you've been dreading for weeks. You check your phone, then check it again. You're not in danger, not really, but you feel like you are. Modern life is made for this kind of tension. Information flies at you like arrows. What might happen? What could go wrong? What you should be afraid of? And somehow, the future becomes more frightening than the present ever is. The body reacts before anything even occurs. Shallow breath, tight chest, distracted thoughts. You're anxious for things that haven't happened and may never happen at all. Seneca knew that feeling. Even in a world without Twitter or spreadsheets or 24-hour news, he lived with constant uncertainty. As a political advisor in the most dangerous court in Rome, Seneca could be exiled or executed on a whim. He had wealth, influence, and fame, but no peace. He writes, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He knew how many times he'd already died in his mind, how often he rehearsed disgrace, disgrace that never arrived, or feared a sickness that passed through town and never touched him. You do the same. We all do. It starts small. A passing thought about losing your job turns into a narrative about losing your home. A strange silence from a friend becomes a prophecy of abandonment. The human mind is a storyteller, and it often tells horror stories in advance. Seneca didn't ignore this impulse. He watched it. He called it out. And that's your first step, too. Awareness without panic. You realize your mind is sprinting into the next week, the next year, the next decade. You bring it back. You tell yourself, this hasn't happened yet. Fear of the future is a double injury. It pretends to prepare you, but actually drains you. It exhausts your emotional energy before anything has happened. You respond to shadows as if they were wounds. But Seneca makes a brutal, helpful point. The worst pain is often optional. He describes fear as a thief who steals your peace while giving you nothing real in return. And when you think about it, how many days have you already lost, spent defending yourself against an event that never came, against a life that never unfolded the way you feared it might? Seneca learned that lesson the hard way. Early in his life, he was banished from Rome on vague accusations. For 8 years, he lived in isolation in Corsica. He thought his career was over, his name forgotten, but he survived. He was eventually recalled. He even returned to power. And looking back, he saw how useless the suffering had been. The nights spent worrying didn't save him. The days spent obsessing didn't soften the blow. What did help, what kept him intact, was choosing how he responded once the blow had actually landed. There's a Stoic principle here. Don't multiply your suffering. It's not heroic to live each day as if disaster were guaranteed. It's not brave to imagine pain in advance. That's not preparation. That's surrender. You can't always stop the thoughts from coming, but you can notice them. You can gently correct them. You can say, that's a possibility, not a prophecy. You can learn to sit with uncertainty without letting it invade your nervous system. That's the modern practice of Stoicism. Seneca knew that fear needs fuel, attention, belief, repetition. But when you break that chain, when you name fear as fear, it loses some of its grip. You feel the ache, but you don't obey it. You see the future, but you don't bow to it. And sometimes you smile, because from the outside, your fear looks ridiculous. A Roman Stoic would laugh at your panic over whether your email was well worded. He'd think it absurd that you lose sleep over a package arriving late, or a number on a scale, or a comment from a stranger. But this isn't about shame. It's about clarity. Seneca wants you to see how much of your suffering is self-inflicted, and how much peace you can regain by simply stepping back, naming your fear, watching it, not chasing it. You still plan, you still care, but you stop rehearsing disasters that don't exist yet. You remember that you've survived every tomorrow so far. You start to treat fear like background noise, not a warning, just static. You tell yourself, I will face what comes when it comes, not before. You want to feel safe. That's what this is really about. Not success, not approval, not perfection, safety. You want to know that nothing terrible is around the corner, that you won't be surprised, that life won't pull the rug out from under you again. So, you imagine everything that could go wrong. You try to get ahead of the pain by picturing it now. It's like building an emotional bunker. If you rehearse every possible disaster, maybe the real one won't hurt as much. Seneca did this too, but not out of fear, out of training. He practiced what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every day, he imagined the worst-case scenarios, the loss of his wealth, the betrayal of friends, the arrival of illness, the inevitability of death. But unlike you, he didn't do it to scare himself. He did it to free himself. There's a sharp difference between rumination and rehearsal. When you ruminate, you spiral. You imagine losing your job and end up questioning your entire worth. But when Seneca rehearsed misfortune, he did it with cool precision. He turned fear into a thought experiment. He dissected the future to make it less monstrous. He once said, "He robs present ills of their power who has rehearsed their coming." Think about that. Fear is loudest when you haven't looked it in the face, when it's vague, when it's blurry. But when you pull it into the light, when you explore it, you start to see its limits. Seneca even acted out his imagined misfortunes. Once a month, he would dress in plain clothes, eat the simplest food, sleep without comfort. He would ask himself, "Is this what I feared?" And every time, he'd discover that even the worst wasn't as bad as he'd built it up to be. You try this too, in a quiet way. You visualize a version of your life stripped of its extras. No title, no savings, no applause. Just you, breathing, thinking, living. And you ask, could I still be myself? Could I still be strong? The answer is yeah. But the truth stings before it soothes. Because you realize that your security is built on illusions, on assumptions that your health will hold, your friends will stay, your job will last. And when you admit those aren't guarantees, it shakes you. Good. Let it. The point of premeditatio malorum isn't to make you paranoid. It's to remove the sting before it arrives, to unmask the future so it doesn't ambush you. You walk through the fire now, so it burns less later. This doesn't mean you want bad things to happen. It means you stop pretending they can't. You replace blind hope with realistic resilience. And something curious happens. When you imagine the worst with full awareness, you start to appreciate the present more. When you picture losing your home, you notice how soft your pillow is tonight. When you rehearse being forgotten, you cherish the one friend who texted back. When you visualize death, even the boring days feel vibrant. Seneca had everything to lose, but he chose to live as if he'd already lost it and discovered that he was still whole. This is the paradox. The more you mentally release what you fear losing, the less power fear holds. You become familiar with the pain before it arrives. You meet it early. You say hello, shake its hand, and move on. Today, your practice is quiet. You close your eyes and think, what if I failed? What if I had to start over? What if tomorrow didn't go the way I wanted? And then you breathe. You feel the tightness loosen a little. You realize that your story wouldn't end. It would just change. You rehearse misfortune to steal back control, not over outcomes, but over your own heart, your reaction, your readiness. This is Stoicism's secret weapon. Not optimism, not avoidance, but familiarity. You make fear your guest, not your god. You stop being surprised. You still hope, yes, but you also train, like a soldier before battle, like a mind preparing for weather it cannot predict. You carry an umbrella not because it will rain, but because it might. And now, that distant anxiety, the one hovering like a cloud, starts to lose its shape. It's not a monster anymore. It's just a possibility, one of many. And you, standing here, are still whole. You're stuck in something. Maybe it's your job, or your family, or the system you live in. The expectations wrapped around you like cords. You can't just walk away. You're not powerless, but you're not free either. You know this tension. Seneca knew it too. He served under Nero, the emperor infamous for his cruelty, instability, and hunger for control. And Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, was his advisor, his speechwriter, his teacher. Imagine that, trying to live by reason and virtue while working in the court of a madman. You can almost hear the accusation. What was he doing there? Wasn't that hypocrisy? But Seneca wasn't trying to control Nero. He couldn't. That was beyond his reach. He was doing what you do when you're caught inside a toxic machine. He was practicing detachment, not apathy, detachment. The Stoic principle here is the dichotomy of control, knowing the difference between what you can change and what you can't. Between your choices and the world's chaos, Seneca applied it like a surgeon with a blade. He stayed calm in an environment built to destroy calm, because he knew what belonged to him and what didn't. You try this in your own way. You're in a meeting and someone speaks to you with disrespect. You want to snap back. You want to fix the whole culture of the room, but you stop. You remember what Seneca practiced. Your behavior is yours. Their behavior is theirs. He writes, "It is not things that upset us, but our judgments about things." The Stoics would say that Nero wasn't the problem. It was the idea that Nero's madness could define Seneca's soul. And that is the dangerous illusion. Thinking that the noise outside has to live inside you. Seneca's detachment wasn't passive. He still worked. He still taught. He still tried to steer Nero when he could. But when things spiraled, when the emperor grew paranoid and violent, Seneca didn't collapse. He didn't cling. He asked to retire. He simplified. He withdrew from the center of power, even though it cost him. This is the Stoic art of stepping back without giving up. You maintain your dignity even in systems you cannot redeem. You act with integrity even when your work is twisted by others. You learn to live in broken places without breaking. Your version might be smaller, but the stakes still feel high. You want justice, but the company resists it. You want honesty, but the culture rewards performance. You feel invisible, misjudged, trapped, but you don't have to internalize any of it. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care selectively. You put your energy where it actually changes something. Your own choices, your own tone, your own timing. You let go of needing the world to match your ideals. There's a calm in that, a strength, not of force, but of refusal. Seneca practiced this when Nero began turning against him. Rumors spread, accusations multiplied. People began to avoid him. He was being erased, politely, then publicly. And Seneca? He focused on his writing, on his letters, on his inner world, on anything that still belonged to him. You do the same. When the world feels unstable, you narrow your attention. You focus on how you speak to people, how you think about setbacks, how you return to your breath again and again. That's not weakness. That's defense. It's the emotional equivalent of clean water in a dirty city. You learn not to beg for clarity from the unclear, not to chase validation from people who don't see you. You turn your back, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You are not here to fix the whole system. You are here to survive it intact. Seneca wrote as the empire burned, literally and figuratively. He knew he couldn't stop its fall, but he could write clearly, think clearly, act clearly, and so can you. Because there's real power in knowing what's not your responsibility, real peace in letting go of what you can't touch. The machine may grind on, the people around you may stay asleep, but you, your awareness, your posture, your voice, those are still yours. You live in the storm, but you are not the storm. You sit in the broken room, but your thoughts stay whole. This is the posture of the Stoic in chaos, not clenched, not cold, composed. You stop wishing the world would change before you could be calm. You learn to be calm first. You sit alone with your thoughts, and for a moment, the future doesn't frighten you. Not because it's certain, but because you've stopped demanding that it be. There's a kind of relief in that, a freedom that has nothing to do with having control and everything to do with having clarity. Seneca spent his final years in this space, no longer in the center of power, No longer trying to shape the empire, he had retreated into writing, into thinking, into refining his voice, not for status, not for fame, but for you. His letters were written to a friend, Lucilius, but they were really written to posterity, to anyone who would one day be afraid. He knew what was coming: the tightening net, the whispers in the court, the fact that at any moment, Nero might decide to eliminate him. So he used what time he had left, not to beg, not to escape, but to teach. In one letter he writes, "We are always afraid of what lies ahead, but death has already laid its hand on all of us. The future, it is already happening." That's not resignation. That's a wake-up call. Fear of the future loses its grip when you stop treating life as something that begins later. Seneca's letters urge you to live now, not when things feel safe, not when everything is aligned, not when your calendar is clear. Now. He wasn't being poetic. He was being urgent. The man writing these letters had a death sentence hanging over him, and yet his words are steady, measured. There's warmth in them, even humor. He writes about how to waste less time, how to endure insults, how to prepare for death without dread. This is what makes his example so sharp. He wasn't brave in theory, he was brave in practice. You learn from this, not just through his arguments, but through his tone. The way he never sounds rushed, even though his life is running out. The way he explains death not as an end, but as a transition, something natural, unremarkable. The way he chooses clarity over comfort, every single time. Seneca's letters are full of small instructions that feel impossibly big when you're afraid. Make your life a fortress. Value your time more than your possessions. Let death find you busy. These are not slogans. They are spiritual armor. You adopt this spirit. When you're afraid of the future, you don't flinch. You speak. You teach. You document. You leave something behind that says, "I was here. I thought clearly. I tried to help." Your fear becomes less important than your legacy. Not the public kind, but the personal kind. What you taught someone in a conversation, what you wrote down for your child, what you stood for quietly when no one was watching. Seneca didn't know his words would outlast Rome. He just knew that fear shrinks when you do something with it. Write through it, breathe through it, share what you've learned through it. Not once you're unafraid, while you're afraid. This is how you shrink the future. Not by locking it down, but by stepping forward and using what you still have. Seneca didn't wait to be safe before he spoke. He spoke because he wasn't safe. You realize something else. Fear makes you feel small, but contribution expands you. Fear wants you to shrink inward, to curl around your doubts. But when you turn outward, even in a letter, even in a gesture, you re-enter the world as someone who can still offer value. Seneca could have disappeared, could have hoarded his insights, wrapped himself in silence, but he kept writing. And those words, steady, firm, human, are still here. So you take the lesson. You start living as someone who has already accepted the end. You begin to make peace with impermanence, not to rush toward it, but to stop hiding from it. And from that peace, a strange kind of productivity appears, a calm willingness to engage, to show up, to say something honest. The future is still uncertain. It always will be. But you've stopped asking for a guarantee. You've started asking, what can I give before I go? There comes a point where fear has nothing left to say. It just repeats itself, softer, then softer still, until it fades into the background. You've rehearsed it, you've named it, you've lived under it without letting it dictate your posture. Now you're at the final test, letting go. For Seneca, the future eventually became the present. Nero sent the order. Seneca was to die. No trial, no final defense, just an imperial command. It arrived not with drama, but with finality. He could have begged. He could have tried to run, but instead, he opened the door to the messengers, thanked them, and calmly prepared himself. There are many accounts of his death, but they agree on this. Seneca was composed. He spoke gently to his wife, who tried to join him in death. He counseled her to live. He opened his veins, as was the Roman custom. The end was slow. He dictated words until he could no longer speak. And then, finally, he was gone. The Stoics didn't view death as a failure. They viewed it as an event, inevitable, like winter. The test wasn't whether you could avoid it, it was whether you could meet it with peace. You're not there. Of course, you're not in a Roman villa preparing for execution, but you face your own version of this test. You fear endings of relationships, of careers, of stages of life. You try to hold on, even when you know it's time to release. But Seneca shows you that letting go isn't the same as giving up. It's the final act of control, the only one that's fully yours. You don't get to choose how long your story lasts, but you get to choose how the last chapter sounds. The Stoics talk about dying well, not dramatically, not tragically, but well, with your mind clear, your heart quiet, your relationships intact, with no unfinished thoughts strangling your peace. To live that way, you start now, not when you're sick, not when the countdown begins. Now, you simplify, you clarify, you speak honestly. You let people know how much they matter before the moment slips away. You live as someone who is ready, not eager, not afraid, just ready. And here's the surprising twist. When you stop fearing the future entirely, when even death no longer terrifies you, then everything opens up. You don't hesitate as much. You don't waste your energy on things that won't matter in the end. You find yourself more forgiving, more focused, less attached to trivial success, more loyal to the things that matter. Peace of mind, consistency of character, depth of connection. This is Seneca's last gift to you, the image of a man who dies not with trembling, but with steadiness, a man who turns fear into fire, controlled, quiet, useful until the very end. He reminds you, you don't need to wait until you're forced to let go. You can start now. You can let go of needing constant reassurance, of needing every outcome to fall in your favor, of needing to be immortal in reputation or untouched by time. You are here for a little while, and that's enough. Let the rest unfold. So you exhale, a little deeper this time. The future is still out there, messy, unknowable, wild, but it's no longer your enemy. You've walked through its shadows and found your balance. Like Seneca, you've stopped asking for guarantees and started asking for wisdom. You've seen that fear loses power when you meet it early. Face it directly and let go before it can take root. You've learned how to move through the world without clinging too tightly and how to build a steady self in the middle of uncertainty. And now, quietly, simply, you return to your day. Take care.